People either love or hate Tesla's autopilot, but what's the real truth about its impact on long Model Y road trips? We put it to the test over a 3,500 mile road trip across mainland Europe, and discovered firsthand where autopilot is better than manual driving and where it isn't. To find out the truth about autopilot, we used our 2022 long-range Tesla Model Y and drove from Scotland to Berlin and then headed south through the Alps and back home again through France. The mixture of motorways and highways combined with tight winding alpine roads and city traffic made this the perfect testing ground to compare both driving modes. But this isn't a lab test. This is what it's like on the road when you're tired, hungry and 3,000 miles from home. And we know some people want the numbers, so we'll track it properly on our next trip. But for this video, we'll focus on the practical pros and cons of using autopilot versus manual driving, and how we felt after using both modes at the end of this trip. You've probably got your own conclusion as to which is best, but you might change your mind by the end. People think manual driving is easier since you're doing the thing you've learned for all your driving years. And people think autopilot will be more stressful and mentally taxing since you need to babysit this AI-powered learner driver. But the reality isn't as simple as it first appears. So first things first, let's talk about energy consumption, including both robotic and human energy. Even though we didn't track energy efficiency differences between both modes, it's safe to assume that autopilot is more efficient given how the driving experience feels. When you're driving manually, you go into your own personal autopilot, where you play a game of keeping up with the cars around you, with many of them driving over the speed limit. When a car's in front, you feel tired and you just want to finish the drive, making you more likely to overtake every single car you meet. With autopilot, it will cruise along at the speed you set it to and makes you more conscious of speed limits, giving you the mental breathing room to double check road signs and speed signs. As a whole, you end up driving at or under the speed limit, and when you do meet another car going slower, you're happy to cruise behind it so you can take in some of the views and enjoy the steady pace of the drive. In autopilot, because you can set the car length distance between you and the car in front, it brakes more gradually and uses mostly regenerative braking. Whereas when you drive manually, you can end up driving too close to cars, which results in braking more harshly and more frequently. Think of autopilot as that steady friend who never rushes, and manual driving as your impatient self who just wants to keep pushing the pace. Now, there's a couple of different autopilot modes, so let's quickly pick them apart. As standard, with each Tesla you get basic autopilot included. This allows you to enable traffic-aware cruise control and lane keeping, but if you want to overtake, you will need to manually disable autopilot, either by braking, taking over the steering wheel, or using the stalk to disable it. And once you've completed your overtake, you'll need to enable autopilot again. Doing these steps every single time you perform an overtake can be pretty frustrating, especially on a long drive. If you wish, you can upgrade to enhanced autopilot, which means you can overtake or change lanes without having to disable it. To auto lane change, you first indicate left or right depending on the lane you wish to switch to, and then gently apply pressure to the steering wheel. Your Tesla should then smoothly move from one lane to another, and you can repeat this process in the opposite direction to complete your overtake. This auto lane change feature works 99% of the time, and when it works, it's great, but when it fails, it's embarrassing. Enhanced autopilot, when it works, leaves you feeling more energized after a long drive on motorways or highways, and reduces your levels of frustration and anxiety. There's also FSD, also known as full self-driving, and while it is available to buy here in Europe, it doesn't deliver the same experience as you can get in North America. So for this video, we won't be covering FSD. So let's take a look at Autopilot's strengths and weaknesses. Autopilot really shines on motorways and highways. This is where it will reliably hold its lane and automatically slow down or speed up to the flow of traffic in front of you. If you're going to be doing lots of motorway miles like we did on our first day on the trip, where we drove for almost 10 hours in a single day, Autopilot makes this possible and allows you to feel somewhat fresh at the end of a long day. If you're going to be driving on country roads or roads with lots of turns, it can work in most situations, but you need to be a lot more vigilant, and this is where the benefits of Autopilot start to become diminished. If you feel stressed about monitoring it and worrying about what it's going to do next, or if it's going to turn hard enough for the upcoming corner, from our experience we find it's time to take over the wheel and start driving manually again. And Autopilot on the highway isn't always perfect. Sometimes it will do a random phantom brake, which is where it will start braking for no apparent reason. And if there is construction on the road, especially traffic cones, it sometimes won't react correctly, or will insist that you change lanes to move away from the traffic cones. I think at this stage, Autopilot just has a fear of traffic cones in general. It must have experienced some deep trauma in the training process. We encountered lots of roadworks on the German autobahns and had to disable Autopilot until we were confident enough again that we could enable it. But these instances are pretty rare, and for the most part, Autopilot is happy to cruise along perfectly fine. There were definitely scenarios though where I was more than happy to take control of the wheel and start driving manually. The first memorable driving moment on the trip was when we drove onto Le Shuttle, which is a train that you drive onto and it travels through the Channel Tunnel, an underwater tunnel connecting England and France. Obviously this had to be done manually, and it was a really cool experience driving a car onto a train. If this had been done on Autopilot, this already strange experience would have been quite scary. Another moment was when we encountered an unrestricted section of the German Autobahn, and since it was safe to do so, we decided to see how fast our Tesla Model Y could go.
Maxed out, that's all she's got.
Obviously, you need to do this manually since Autopilot will only travel at certain speeds in line with the detected speed limit. But for this instance, I was more than happy to take over. If you do ever get the chance to test out your top speed on the German Autobahn, please make sure it's safe to do so and always respect other road users. And probably the best driving experience of them all was when we drove from Austria to Italy and came down the Maloja Pass. Those tight switchback roads as we drove down the mountain towards the Italian lakes is a driving experience I'll never forget. And if I had the option of driving this manually or using Autopilot, I'd choose manual driving every single time. Being able to go at your own pace and take in your surroundings, feeling the weight of the steering wheel as you turn almost full lock to make it around each corner is something Autopilot can't replace. But being able to quickly switch back into Autopilot at any given moment can often bring a welcome sigh of relief. After making it down the Maloja Pass, we still had a fair distance to travel in order to get to our destination. and the tight winding roads in the small Italian villages after a long day of driving quickly took their toll, leaving me absolutely exhausted when we arrived at the campsite in 35-degree heat. When the driving conditions are great and you've got amazing views, driving manually can be a whole lot of fun. But when you're travelling long distance and doing lots of highway miles, being able to turn on autopilot at the tap of a stalk is the peace of mind that makes road tripping in this car an absolute joy. However, the driver isn't the only one affected by autopilot, for better and worse. Depending on your driving style, as in if you're a terrible driver or a safe driver, passengers might feel more comfortable or not when autopilot is engaged. Because it isn't in as much of a rush as the majority of humans, overall it will feel much smoother and calm for your passengers. But initially, if passengers aren't familiar with how autopilot feels, they might be slightly uneasy, especially on automatic lane changes. It can sometimes feel a bit too robotic and less human. It's very subtle, but it will amaze you how much people can pick up on these slight differences. Passengers might also feel less safe because they'd rather a human be in control, rather than a line of code or an AI supercomputer. But since I was travelling with my wife, who's experienced me using autopilot frequently, she had very little complaints. Aside from the odd auto lane change cancellation or phantom braking, overall she felt relaxed when autopilot was behaving. It actually allowed her to doze off and take a power nap, leaving me to drive alone because she had confidence I was still energised and alert, because autopilot was doing most of the heavy lifting. If your passengers aren't familiar with autopilot, they could be uneasy at first, but after a long trip, they should be fairly familiar with its quirks. The more you understand when and when not to use it, the more comfortable they'll feel. You might be wondering, what are the practical benefits of autopilot in real-world driving scenarios? Well, a huge benefit of the Tesla Supercharger network and the Tesla navigation system is that as soon as you enter your next destination, it will automatically calculate where you will need to stop to supercharge. This will happen regardless of whether you choose to drive manually or use autopilot. However, if you're driving manually, you're going to exert more mental and physical energy, and you'll likely want to stop more frequently in order to stretch and take a short break. When you use autopilot for the bulk of your drive, you're essentially able to get more rest. You still need to have hands on the wheel ready to take over, but you don't have to steer or press the accelerator or brake pedal. So you're physically using less energy. This allows you to essentially be a supervisor and just monitor the traffic, the road conditions, and the autopilot's performance. So you end up having more energy to spare, and this means you can actually drive for longer without the need to stop as frequently compared to driving manually. This also means that you'll actually charge faster once you reach a supercharger, since the battery on your Tesla will be at a lower state of charge. Put simply, because autopilot allows you to arrive at superchargers feeling more relaxed, it's not just your body that charges better, your car charges better too. Max charging speeds only occur when the battery is at a low state of charge, so you really want to aim to arrive at your supercharger with less than 15% battery. Try not to go much lower than 10%, as this could cause unnecessary stress and anxiety, because you could end up cutting it too close, especially if there are any breakdowns on the road or superchargers that are busy. But for the most part, autopilot will help your supercharger stops become less frequent and more efficient. driving anywhere can be somewhat unpredictable since road and weather conditions can change unexpectedly. As we've touched on previously, there's a time and place for when to use autopilot and when to stick to driving without it. In city traffic, it can be helpful if the roads are fairly straightforward and you don't need to switch lanes often. This is especially helpful in stop and start city traffic, but be aware that autopilot will not stop for traffic lights. It will simply stay in lane and drive at the speed limit you set, so you need to be ready to stop at traffic lights, stop signs, and give ways when required. If you're driving on winding roads, it's best to drive manually as autopilot can struggle here and you never know who's coming round the bend. So I think it's much more convenient and safe to let the human be in full control in these scenarios. Another thing to consider is weather conditions. For the most part, on highways and motorways, autopilot performs reasonably well even in heavy rain. But if you're in a severe downpour like we experienced in Germany, it's best to assume full control. Reduce your speed and drive to the road in weather conditions, especially because autopilot works off vision only, using the camera in the windshield to look ahead. No LiDAR or radar is used here, so in conditions where visibility is limited to the human eye, the same will apply to autopilot. So which mode leaves you feeling more relaxed and less stressed? Without a doubt, this road trip was so much more enjoyable because we could use autopilot for the bulk of the drive. It was clear from day one that we'd be using autopilot for the majority of our motorway miles. We covered a lot of distance on this trip, and as much as we felt tired and exhausted by the end of it, I can't imagine how we would have felt if we'd had to drive the whole distance manually. When safe to do so, it was a real bonus to be able to take in the surroundings, knowing that the car was maintaining lane discipline and speed. It also helped reduce the physical exertion of manually steering, accelerating and braking. If you haven't used autopilot on a long drive, that might sound dramatic. You'll be thinking, get over yourself, it's not that tiring turning a steering wheel and pressing a pedal. But trust me, once you experience it, you'll soon realise how much energy you actually use performing these tasks. And it all adds up when you're on a long road trip, especially when you cover any great distance. So, is autopilot better than manual driving for road trips? Well, it's going to help you drive more efficiently. It's also going to enhance the quality of your drive, since you'll save your own personal energy and be able to soak in the landscapes you're driving through. Plus, it's super easy to switch between autopilot and manual driving when you need to make the change. So in that case, it's definitely better than manual driving in most scenarios, and I'd really miss the feature if they ever removed it. But autopilot isn't for everyone. My wife still prefers to drive manually, mainly because she doesn't fully trust driving with autopilot. She hasn't spent enough time using the feature to understand its quirks and when to enable and disable it, but also she just likes driving manually and having complete control. If you don't fully trust autopilot yet, you're not alone. Even I don't hand over full trust, and that's exactly how you should use it. As a tool, not a replacement. I've had my fair share of phantom braking, auto lane change cancellations, and even autopilot trying to take us off the road. But these scenarios are few and far between, and I remain vigilant and ready to take over at any time. If you can learn to understand its flaws, you'll be able to use this tool to help you feel more relaxed and refreshed the next time you choose to go on a long drive. I love that autopilot comes with every Tesla, and it really makes the Tesla Model Y the ultimate road trip vehicle. Enhanced Autopilot is also a super helpful upgrade, solely for the auto lane change feature. But it would be really nice to see Tesla roll out a monthly subscription model for this feature. Many people will only benefit from Enhanced Autopilot on long road trips, which they might only do once or twice a year. So having the option to subscribe when you need it and cancel when you don't would be a nice feature. Perhaps they will roll this out in the future like they did with FSD. Overall, I think Autopilot is the better mode for road tripping, especially if you're doing lots of motorway and highway miles, because that can become really repetitive and draining. But when you get to drive on those winding, epic roads, it's time to take control of the wheel and experience the thrill of manual driving once again. So what do you think of Autopilot? Have you used it for long road trips? Are you lucky enough to be in North America to make use of FSD? Let us know in the comments. And if you want to see how autopilot and manual driving played out day by day on our 3,500 mile journey, you can check out the full playlist here.